Be careful what you wish for. If only someone told Izuku this sooner. Maybe he could have been lucky enough to be born quirkless. Yet he knows, through each painful death, that things could have been worse. So much worse. Midoriya Izuku Quirk, returned by death. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. After watching this video, don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Kirishima, Mina, Kaminari and Sato had a look of doom weighing down their faces. Zero chewed on his lip nervously, and they all watched Aizawa like he was the ferryman about to carry them to hell. Whoever failed the exam would be left in school, suffering through remedial classes while the rest joined together for a fun school trip to a forest lodge. Kaminari, Aizawa began, reading of his list of doomed names. Kirishima, he enunciated slowly. Mina, a rumbling bell told Loa for each word. Sato, the final chime, and all fell silent, save from the judge himself. Zero, you all failed the practical exam. And thus, he stared them down, and in that moment, he was neither man nor human. He was a monster. We're all going on the school trip. The man grinned in a way that said the only joy he found in life was to emotionally torment his students. Izuku sighed. This is how you create trust issues. The condemned five jumped from their seats, cheering and crying in equal measure. Their good spirits were quickly squashed, however, when Aizawa revealed that the lodge wasn't just some nice vacation, but a boot camp to rigorously train and hone their abilities. And of course, everyone who failed will still be attending extra classes. The teacher spoke monotonously. Honestly, it probably would have been easier if you just stayed at school. Now take these pamphlets and pass them on. There was an oppressive atmosphere in the air as five students stared longingly at the rest of their friends, so carefree, so innocent. Mina buried her face in her palms and Kaminari prayed silently to whichever deity would listen. Sato had produced a pack of cookies from somewhere, chewing them down like a starving man, while Kirishima risked his life by sharing his woes with Kachan. The blonde looked like he was about ready to commit murder when Hagakure suddenly jumped from her seat. We should all go shopping together, she squealed, full of energy and impossibly animated for someone who was invincible. We're going to need lots of supplies for the school trip, and there's a local mall not too far we could all go to. And just like that, whatever dark miasma had spread through the classroom dissipated like clouds parting to make way for the sun. Mina had stars in her eyes. Kaminari looked up from his seat like his prayers had been answered, and Ida was nodding approvingly. A marvelous idea, he concurred. It is always good to be prepared for any situation. Uraraka nudged Izuku lightly with an elbow. Will you come with us, Deku-kun? She inquired, a sunlit smile on her face and looking at him with the brightness of 1,000 stars. And honestly, Izuku would rather die than ruin that. All right, he conceded, and when in an impossible feat her smile grew even brighter, he knew he made the right choice. Izuku didn't know how long he had been standing there, just staring in complete disbelief of what was before him. At first he thought he must be mistaken, because there was no way that what he was seeing was actually true. So, he stepped closer, to reassure himself that it was just some terribly dark hallucination. Staring into the eyes of his own reflection, emerald green painted in circles on the glass window, he looked at what was beyond. His eyes raked slowly over every little crevasse and detail, recreating a perfect imprint in his brain to make sure it was real. He blinked his eyes, and still, there it was. Plain as day and looking as innocent as could be. Except it wasn't. It must be a joke, surely, he thought. Because no one could be so stupid, so insensitive, so vile as to think that this was a good idea. That this was completely okay, and in no way fucked up whatsoever. But it was. He felt nauseous, a sickness that rotted him deep to the core. Izuku had seen a lot of things in his life, things he wished he could erase and scrub from his memory. Things no one should ever have to bear witness to. But this was different, in a way he couldn't properly describe. It wasn't the same gut reaction of terror as his own viscera spilled from his abdomen, or the despair of watching someone you thought would be with you for years to come crumble into dust. It couldn't be compared, but yet this hurt in such a strange new way. He felt betrayed, but by what, he did not know. And try as he might, as much as he wanted to convince himself that this was some sort of sick joke, the chortling teens beside him reminded him that this was reality. That there were people out there who looked at Stain and did not immediately see a murderer, but someone to admire. It didn't matter if he killed people or not, because he did it for a good cause. That he was cool, don't misunderstand. It wasn't like Izuku was unable to wrap his head around why people may feel drawn to him. Stain had a hidden charisma that spoke to people sharing his same ideals. And there was nothing wrong with that. Heroes weren't perfect, on that, Izuku could agree. The system was corrupt, and there needed to be change. Hero did not mean good. But just because your goal is admirable does not mean that your path to reach it is justified. Izuku did not agree, and Izuku did not like him, but he understood Stain. But what he didn't understand, what absolutely baffled him, was why that somehow meant it way okay to create merchandise based off of a serial killer. His hands clenched to creaking fists, and unbidden, he could feel the power of one for all taking over him. He reached a hand out, and with shaky fingers he touched the glass of the display window so softly, you might think it was an ancient artifact. His breathing came in shorter and shorter bursts, as the pads of his fingers pressed into the glass with ever-growing pressure to match. If he could just reach in, just break. You could just do it. Show them. Do it. Who's gonna to stop you? But no, that's wrong. It's not right. This isn't right. This fucking insult. Just imagine if Ida were here. Imagine how he would feel. Don't you want to help your friend? Don't you? This isn't helping. You should find who did this. Find them. Find them and no! He screamed. He didn't care if people gave him odd looks and parents pulled their children closer. This isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't right. What's wrong with me? One for all seeped out of him like a popped balloon. Shame of a magnitude he'd never felt before filled him, and in the middle of that mall, standing before a killer's merchandise, he cried, "What's wrong with me? I just want to go back to normal. Why can't I just stop being like this? You really are pathetic. Hey!" An arm swung around his shoulders and pulled him in, and Izuku's muscles pulled tight at the sudden touch. "Why are you crying? Something wrong?" At first, he thought it must be one of his friends, and fear froze his stomach to ice. "Please don't look," he thought. "Don't look at me like this. I beg you." But when he glanced up to see the person holding him, he was taken aback by what he saw, because it wasn't the reassuring smile of one of his friends, but a man he did not know. His face was covered in a wavy curtain of hair, constricted by the black hoodie that was pulled over his head, hiding his appearance. Izuku muttered, skin itching with discomfort at the stranger's touch. Why did he have to be so close? He understood someone being concerned by a teen crying alone in a mall, but hadn't this person ever heard of personal space? "Oh," the weird man uttered suddenly, absolutely delighted. "I recognize you. You're from UA. I saw you in that video. Midoriya Izuku, right?" There was no question about which video he meant, and Izuku's discomfort grew. Even now, he would have the occasional stranger walk up to him and ask for a picture. "This is gonna be so sick." They'd laugh, angling their cell phone. "My friends are gonna be so jealous when I show them this. That's so cool." Izuku could hear the smile in the hooded man's voice. "You're a real little hero, huh?" He cackled, and leaned in closer until he was whispering in his ear. "I'm so glad I got to meet you again." Chills slithered down Izuku's spine, the words freezing him in place. "I hope you remember me. I'd be kinda hurt if you didn't." Once more, Izuku looked up at that hair-covered face. Shigaraki leaned back, slowly unveiling the hideous grin that tore his face apart from ear to ear. Rows of unkempt teeth were covered by lips so dry, they looked like they were ready to snap. The cracks and crevices littering the sickly skin bled red, and carved even deeper into his mouth as it moved to form words. "Let's take a walk. Let's take a walk." The first thought that passed through Izuku's mind was, "Let's not," but what left his mouth instead was a simple, "Why?" Instantly, 4 of Shigaraki's fingers wrapped around his throat, with the middle one hovering just a twitch away. And despite the somewhat inconvenient grip, Shigaraki was still able to muster enough strength to dig the digits into the soft skin hard enough to bruise. "Do you remember my quirk?" he asked, and Izuku could feel the man smirk into his hair. "Once this last finger touch you, you'll be nothing but dust. So I suggest you consider your next actions very, very closely." And oh, Izuku remembered, more than Shigaraki could know. And with memories clear as glass, he remembered. He remembered how his skin turned dry with decay, flaking off his muscles and floating away in tiny fragments, not unlike a snake crawling out of its old husk. Except unlike a snake, there wasn't a new shiny layer of skin waiting beneath, but flesh and blood and screaming pain. And he remembered the look on Ajui's face before her head faded into nothing but ash, mixing together with the blood spurting out of her neck, turning it into a dull crimson sludge. He remembered, but what he couldn't remember was the fear. He knew of its existence, but it was like words stuck to the tip of your tongue. He knew, but no matter how far he reached and scrambled, he couldn't find that lost feeling of terror that drowned him like an icy sea, pulling him deeper into its depths until all he had was darkness. Now, he was only left with anger, which swelled inside of him and embraced his soul like an old friend. Izuku smiled, warm as the sun, and opened his arms wide. A quiet whisper left his lips, and he mouthed the words, "Welcome home. I wonder how many I can take with me after I'm done with you before the police shows up." Shigaraki mused with glee, the last finger floating dangerously close by his hostage's neck. 10? 12? What do you think? I think you should get to the point. Izuku pressed his lips into a thin line as he attempted to glare at the villain behind him. Unbeknownst to the criminal, however, the threatening words actually filled Izuku with a sense of relief. He'd be the first to die. Izuku would be back before Shigaraki hurt anyone else. Even so, while the boy wasn't worried about the people around them like the villain wanted him to, he kept still. Because through his anger was another feeling. A feeling much more powerful than his urge to rip himself free and take Shigaraki down once and for all. And it was the one feeling that killed more humans than any war ever could: curiosity. Izuku found himself in a situation with an opportunity too good to pass up, and he did not want it to end so soon. Because what did Shigaraki want? It was a question too tantalizing to go unanswered. So, with a sharp nod and in an even tone, he said, "All right, I'll come with you." Izuku tried not to squirm as he waited for Shigaraki to speak. The bench under him felt too hard, and his legs were starting to go numb. He eyed the people passing them by to distract himself, listening to their shouts and laughs while they wandered around without a care in the world, completely unaware of the danger lurking in the middle of them. Izuku wondered how long that would last. When the villain decided that his victim looked uncomfortable enough, he let out a quiet chuckle and in a deep voice finally spoke. "You know, there's a lot of things I hate in this egotistical world, but there's something that's been bothering me especially lately. Maybe you could solve it for me?" Izuku sat silent, feeling 4 deadly fingers resting considering against his throat. "Have you read the news lately?" "I have. It's funny, you know, even after I let all those nummies run wild, it didn't even make the front page. Everyone's too busy talking about Stain. It's like they forgot. He seems to be the only thing people care about nowadays." Shigaraki's voice was turning increasingly aggressive, and Izuku's found it increasingly hard to breathe as the scarred man subconsciously tightened his grip around the student's throat. Stain. What's so special about him anyways? Why do everyone like him so much? What's the difference between him and me?" Even if he wanted to, Izuku was unable to get a word past his lips. He gasped around the hand, slowly robbing him of consciousness as white spots began to dance in the corners of his vision. His body begged for him to act, but his curiosity sat like a devil on his shoulder, whispering soothing assurances in his ears. Not yet, it said, urging him to endure. "We still don't know what he wants. We have to wait, we have to know. He's not going to kill us yet." Just after that though, perhaps noticing his distress, Shigaraki eased his grip enough to allow Izuku a gulp of much-needed fresh air. "We're doing the same shit, aren't we?" he muttered, bitter. "We're just destroying what we don't like." Izuku glanced up at the villain, observing molten red eyes that burned with the glint of insanity. Mulling over his words carefully, he attempted to find the best combination so that he could communicate with the volatile man without setting him off. "I thought Stain was one of you," he started, and Shigaraki's eye twitched in annoyance. Green eyes cast a quick look to the roaring crowd, then back to the man. With a twist of his lips, he pressed on. "Guess not. I don't like him either. He tried to kill my friend." Shigaraki scoffed irritatedly, ignoring the boy's slip-up. "I wasn't talking about you," he said, mouth pulling down into an open frown that displayed his gritted teeth. "Besides, you made bigger news than I did. So annoying." The sound of nails dragging across skin made Izuku's hair stand on end as Shigaraki scratched his neck in frustration. Cracked nails gouged into old scars, working to add to the canvas of puckered lines already there, some still a raw pink in their freshness. Breaths through his nose, a whistling sound as they passed, the chatter of the crowd forced to drown the noises out. Insects crawled under the skin, moving through his body and to his throat. Fingers flexed unwittingly, the magnetic force pulling them in. Scratch. Itching, stinging, hurting. He wanted to. Scratch. I don't like him, Izuku repeated, forcing words through his throat, tingling like acid. But I understand his motivations. That's the difference. When people understand you, they can find something to sympathize with. Even if you don't like them, you can still agree with their words, and that's... The boy twisted his neck, glaring up at Shigaraki unwaveringly. That's why it's Stain's face on all the posters, why you can buy your own replica of his mask or decorate your shelf with his action figure, instead of you. People don't like you, and they don't understand you either. Crimson eyes bore into him, delving places deep and dangerous, but Izuku refused to break. Silence, the people around them melted away and forgotten. Then, ever so slowly, the man started to laugh. Dark chuckles reverberated through Izuku's skull and jostled his brain, and they soon turned into cackles of delight as Shigaraki stared down at him. I see. I think I get it now. Shigaraki smiled, his mouth filled with too many teeth to look natural. I really can't stand you, Midoriya Izuku, but you're right, aren't you? Izuku shook in place as the man holding him trembled against his back with a chest full of laughter. And when Shigaraki's mirth turned into a sound of genuine amusement, he wasn't sure whether he should feel disturbed or not. Then, abruptly, the laughter stopped, only leaving behind a small buzz that slowly gained volume as the endless noise of the busy mall faded back into existence. So what I need is an ideal, huh? Just like the hero killer, Shigaraki mused, eyes alight with what Izuku could only describe as wonder. My ideal, he breathed, his expression morphing gradually until it settled on one of realization. I do have one, and then he smiled, wide enough to split his face in two. But despite the unsettling nature of it, this was probably the most relaxed Shigaraki had ever looked. Someone only giving him a passing glance might not even think twice about it, just turning away to go on about their day. Because this wasn't a face of malice, or a grin of pleasure, as Shigaraki basked in the pain of others. No, this was some way, somehow, something that could actually be considered happiness. Then, gone just as quickly as the laughter, the smile turned into bitterness as the villain let out a weary sigh. His eyes turned dark, and with a snarl, spat through his teeth. It all comes back to All Might, doesn't it? Everything. It's all about All Might. Izuku opened his mouth, maybe to object. I want to be a hero. Large emerald eyes sparkled with the dreams of youth. I want to save people with a smile, just like All Might. And closed it. They spent a moment in thoughtful silence, the hand on his neck almost forgotten. I guess it is, he acquiesced, finally. Then, rolling the dice for the gamble, he queried. So, what are you trying to achieve? Shigaraki glanced down at him, a scrutinizing look in his eyes. The little hero's curious, huh? He grinned. Maybe I'll just keep it my little secret for now. Still, this has been a very fruitful conversation, Midoriya Izuku. I'm glad I found you here. Izuku looked away and mumbled under his breath. You're welcome. The fingers around his neck twitched. There's something else that's been bothering me though, Shigaraki said suddenly. In an instant, spindly digits buried themselves into Izuku's dark curls and his neck made a snapping noise as Shigaraki wrenched his head back forcefully. He hissed in pain and closed his eyes momentarily, and when he opened them again, all he saw was glaring red. Are you even scared? Izuku didn't answer. He wasn't sure he could. His mind was blank as the all-consuming ruby sea surrounded him, and all he could do was to stare back. Eyes wide open, unblinking and glowing with unspoken emotion, his throat growing ever tighter as his breaths turned shallow, and then, Deku-kun? The pair froze as the name was uttered, scared and uncertain. Together, they turned their heads to see the round face of a girl, chocolate eyes observing them with confusion and fear. Her arms fidgeted in an attempt to find their right use, and Izuku realized he was out of time. He didn't even need to think. Effortlessly, his hand snapped up and gripped Shigaraki's wrist in a crushing hold. Surprised, the villain attempted to complete the circle around the boy's neck. But with a yank, Izuku tore himself free and pushed his head as far away from the man as it could go. It ripped out several strands of his hair in the process, which still clung to Shigaraki's fingers and fluttered through the air innocently. But it was a small price to pay for freedom. With the slim arm still in his grasp, Izuku stopped taking risks. He flicked his wrist, bent backwards and, snap. Shigaraki howled through his teeth, pulling the injured hand to his chest and cradling it protectively. He stumbled from his seat, and with a furious expression twisting his face, lunged forward with the one still functioning arm aimed at Izuku. Never losing focus, the teen dodged into a crouch. Snapped a leg out, he swept it into the villain's ankles and sent him careening off to the side. His head thunked against the floor, and his black hood splayed out behind him as he rolled onto his back, groaning. Izuku walked up beside him, purposeful steps leading his way. He raised a foot, aimed his red sneaker, and stomped. A loud crack resonated in his ears as he broke his former captor's intact wrist, and he finally let himself exhale a quick breath of relief. He bent down to place his hand on the man's shoulder, flipping him onto his stomach unceremoniously. Taking a no-too-kind hold of the broken appendages, he navigated them until they were resting threateningly over Shigaraki's neck. "Uraraka," he spoke coolly. Deku? What's going on?" Izuku didn't look at her, too focused on the threat under him to bother. Even if the villain was currently incapacitated, he wasn't going to take any chances. "I'd rather not go through this again. Call the police," he said, and after some thought added, "And get a hero over here as well if you can." Uraraka flickered her eyes between her friend and the stranger beneath him, currently pressed flush against the floor and trashing his legs while swearing loudly. She turned back to Izuku and nodded. "All right." Izuku listened numbly to the tap-tap-taps of Uraraka's phone as he continued to stare Shigaraki down, before the noise was drowned out by the growing crowd. "I wonder if it's illegal to use someone else's quirk," the boy mused curiously, observing Shigaraki's twitching hands. Hello? I need a police officer." Izuku was lost in a different world, a world made by two, a villain and a designated hero. He wasn't brought back to reality until a hero and a few police officers arrived on the scene to take the captured criminal away. Shigaraki hissed as his broken hands were cuffed behind his back, and his eyes seared as he stared at Izuku with pure hate. The boy stared back, face blank. One of the police officers smiled at Izuku, seemingly impressed as he thanked him for catching such a high-profile villain. His partner glared at the other officer, before scolding the freckled teen for his recklessness. Izuku wasn't surprised by the response, but seriously, what was he supposed to do? Stay still and hope Shigaraki would let him live? Probably. He was questioned several times if he needed any medical assistance, but Izuku declined them each time. "I'm fine, but my throat will probably have a few bruises tomorrow." He nodded toward Shigaraki, who had finally ceased struggling as he was escorted away. The man stood hunched over, head bowed, long pale hair concealing whatever expression his face currently held. "He probably needs it more than I do." The cuffed villain raised his head slightly. A sharp red glow peeked through ragged strands, holding a silent promise for the future. But Shigaraki didn't need words for his message to ring loud and clear. "I'm going to kill you." His eyes stung Izuku's soul like a sharp cut of the knife. "I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to kill you." Curious crowds of people were shooed to the side as 3 people were escorted out of the mall. Uraraka had been asked to come along as a witness, and she had made it her mission to stand like a shield between Shigaraki and her friend. She watched the black hooded figure like a hawk, her usual soft eyes dark and calculating and with a dangerous frown on her face. Like the villain could get free at any moment. Shigaraki looked back, observing the 2 students as they were ushered into a waiting police car. The hooded man was still surrounded by police officers and a vigilant hero, standing as if waiting for something. Izuku peered on curiously until the serious-looking policewoman closest to him answered the silent question. "They want better security before they leave," she provided, nodding toward the group. "Another hero has been called in, along with something more sturdy than this to transport the villain in." She slapped the roof of the police car for emphasis. Izuku nodded with understanding, and the woman pushed his door shut so they could leave. Before it swung closed completely, the boy took a last glance at Shigaraki. His mouth moved, cracked lips forming just a single word. "Midoriya," click, and the door sealed. Izuku could hear his own breath in his ears. The air around him felt oppressing, cold and careless, turning his skin into goosebumps. He shivered, staring through the black window at darkened gray and a dot muted red, which stood out against everything else. A color screaming for attention, an universal sign of caution. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He curled his fingers into clenched fists, pushing them down into his lap. "Be still," he told his body, but the name echoed in his head. Midoriya. The way Shigaraki looked at him, the crimson of his eyes flickering wildly, but never losing their focus on him. "Midoriya, are you really alright?" Uraraka asked, and Izuku took a heavy breath at the sound of her voice. He turned his head. The girl fidgeted uncomfortably in the seat next to him, displaying her nervosity. It's not like I don't trust you, but I know you don't like to rely on others, so." She trailed off, eyes drifting to the side. Izuku's face softened, but a light tremble still stayed in his limbs uninvited. "Uraraka, I'm okay." "Really?" he said and gave her a small smile. The air of apprehension around her faded as she answered him with a short nod and returned his expression. Eventually, they arrived at the police station, and the car pulled up into the parking lot just outside. They unbuckled their belts, and it wasn't long before Izuku found himself face to face with the lead investigator of the League of Villains, Tsukachi Naomasa. "Now, please start from the beginning and tell me in detail what happened." He began the interrogation, holding a notebook in one hand and a pen in the other. A sound recorder sat on the table, the blinking red light on it indicating that it was working. It kind of reminded Izuku of his therapy sessions with Dr. Kusai, except unlike those, what he said here wouldn't stay between just the two of them. "Some of my classmates and I went to the mall together to buy supplies for our upcoming school field trip. When I was alone, Shigaraki came up behind me and took me hostage and asked me some questions. Do you know why he was there?" Tsukachi cut in, pupils sharp and serious as he leaned closer. "He looks right in his element," Izuku thought. "No." He shook his head before expanding. "I don't know if he planned the whole thing or if it was just some crazy coincidence." The policeman hummed, a mix of concern and thoughtful on his face. "It could mean a huge breach to UA's security if this attack was planned. Either way, we shouldn't take any chances." "What did you two talk about?" "Well," the freckled student thought back to their conversation. The moment Shigaraki spoke, his name was still clear, playing perfectly like a movie in the back of his skull. "Midoriya." He wondered if there was a sequel. "He asked me about Stain," Izuku answered, and Tsukachi nodded in encouragement for him to continue. "He wanted to know what made them different. The way he spoke about him makes me think Stain was never a member of the League." The detective sat back a bit, but he didn't look too surprised. "It makes sense. I've seen people online discussing the theory that Stain worked independently from the League, and it lines up with what we know about the man. Stain was the lone wolf type, and his ideals don't seem to line up with whatever Shigaraki's are. Shigaraki hates him," the young hero returned. "I think he's jealous that Stain got more attention than he did, so Shigaraki wanted to understand why." "Exactly," Izuku confirmed with a nod. "I told him that the difference was that, unlike him, people know what Stain's ideals are. Whether you hate him or not, he has an understandable goal that a lot of people agree with: eradicate the so-called false heroes and reclaim the title for those deemed worthy." Tsukachi was still transcribing his words to paper as he asked. "And how did he respond?" The boy stared up into the ceiling. "He laughed." The detective let his pen hover over the paper as he paused. "He laughed? I think he came to some sort of realization," Izuku explained. "A goal, some sort of motivation, his ideology. I'm not sure what exactly. He didn't answer me when I asked, so you'll have to try questioning him yourself." Tsukachi scribbled down a note. "Did he mention anything else?" The student shook his head. "No." He trailed off, thinking back to his encounter with the criminal. He squinted as a memory nipped at him, and with some hesitation he said, "Actually, there was one other thing. All Might. He said everything always comes back to All Might." His interrogator slowly placed his chin in his palm, humming aloud and seemingly in deep thought. "The reason Shigaraki came to the USJ was to kill All Might. Their number was created for that sole purpose. It's clear he has some sort of grudge against the number one hero. Whether that is simply because of his position as the symbol of peace or something more personal, it's hard to say. Guess you'll just have to ask him then." Izuku shrugged. "Villains like to talk," the detective smiled. "True enough," he agreed, straightening his back into proper sitting position. He glanced at something in his notebook. "And when did Uraraka arrive?" "Just after I asked Shigaraki about his goal," the teen informed. "That's when I apprehended him." "Ah, yes, about that." The policeman shifted his eyes to the side uncomfortably, before turning them back to Izuku's and attempting a reassuring smile that looked more guilty than anything. Izuku rolled his eyes and cut in before the man could start. "I didn't use my quirk," he said, fighting to keep his voice professional. He had to bite his cheek and take a calming breath to manage, allowing the pain to keep him in check. "Tsukachi doesn't make the rules," he reminded himself, exhaling slowly. "He just enforces them." With a deadpan expression he continued, "I don't need one for all to break someone's bones." Tsukachi gave him a long look before he pinched the bridge of his nose with a deep suffering sigh. "No, I suppose you don't." He shook his head. "Anyways, I'm happy to be saved the headache of writing out a report of illegal quirk use. Not to mention, I would rather not have to punish the one who caught one of Japan's most wanted criminals." Izuku grimaced in response. I still think that's a stupid law. The detective wore a perfect poker face before his eyes shifted to the ceiling, frowning. The law isn't always perfect, he said. But it's still the law we have to follow. Izuku wasn't impressed. He scoffed. Someone should change it then. When Sakachi finally finished his interrogation, 3 hesitant knocks sounded at the door. The officer opened it to reveal a nervous-looking All Might in his true form standing in the doorway. The dark-haired man gave his friend a reassuring smile. He's clear to go, Sakachi affirmed. The hero smiled and glanced over the broader man's shoulder to see his green-haired student quietly observing them. So he's not in any trouble, is he? He implored. Sakachi motioned his head in confirmation, and All Might breathed a sigh of relief. Then, with a nod towards the still-seated teen, he inquired, Could I borrow your room for a moment? I'd like to talk to him in private. The policeman gave a sweep of his hand to motion his friend inside. No problem. Take all the time you need. All Might smiled gratefully at his friend before stepping inside the room and wrangled his large body awkwardly into the chair Sakachi just vacated. The detective left the two alone, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The blonde hero stared at the shut exit for a moment. He scratched the back of his neck and shifted his attention to his student. Calculating green bore into nervous blue, eyebrows quirked upwards curiously as Izuku waited for the hero to speak. My boy, he began. The voice wavered slightly and All Might cleared his throat before continuing. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere but here right now, but he continued on valiantly despite the suffocating tension. I want to start by saying what you did today was very brave. That being said, Izuku's eyes narrowed. I mean, don't misunderstand. I am very proud of you, I am. But I'm also worried. Everything may have turned out fine this time, but if you have made even a small mistake, I wouldn't. All Might exhaled, looking at him in bewildered exasperation. You don't know, I do know. Izuku's face was stone. There's no point in worrying about me. This was the only outcome. I'm not going to apologize for it, so drop the lecture. His teacher looked taken aback by his brazen attitude. Izuku couldn't help feeling guilty at the hurt in his mentor's eyes, even if the hero buried it quickly with a harsh frown and pale-knuckled fists. Have you been meeting with Dr. Kusai? Izuku's eyes widened for a moment. Then he snapped. How do you know her? All Might knew that Izuku was seeing a therapist, but he was positive he had never told the hero the name of said therapist. Did his mother tell him? The man looked sheepish, avoiding the sharp glare digging into his skin. He coughed into a fist, stalling for time as he tried to think of the right words. Well, as your teacher, I've been concerned about your recent behavior and shift in personality. He was sweating bullets by now. It's not like I know anything about what you two talk about during your sessions. That would be very illegal, not to mention a huge breach of privacy. For every stutter, Izuku felt himself growing less and less impressed by the rambling words that left his mentor's mouth. The whole point of telling All Might about his sessions was so he would stop worrying, yet here they are. Stalking his therapist? Really? All Might. The name was spoken softly, yet it was enough to shut the blonde up as he stared at Izuku with silent panic. It was almost funny, watching the number one hero acting like a child who just got caught stealing the last cookie out of the cookie jar. Izuku was not amused. Look, All Might sighed, taking in the angry green of his student's glare in defeat. I know it was wrong of me, but I wanted to make sure she would be good for you. There's a lot of people out there who don't take work seriously, even when that work is to help other people. If she was one of those people, she could do you more harm than good. So you decided to run a background check on her. All Might breathed out through his nose slowly, looking at the floor. He nodded. Yes, I did. He looked guilty, but not as guilty as Izuku thought he should. I understand that you're angry. Even if I had only your best interest in mind, I shouldn't have gone behind your back like that. Especially as your teacher. It was very unprofessional of me. Izuku rubbed the back of his skull. He could hear a muted thud-thud-thud that gaining volume in his ears, signaling the incoming headache grate. He didn't know if he was mad. He knew he should be, but it was kind of hard when All Might looked at him with such genuine concern it hurt. Still, that the teacher never even bothered to ask him first left a sour taste in his mouth. He hated the feeling of his privacy being breached, and he doubted Dr. Kusai would appreciate it either. He wondered if he should tell her, next time. She deserved to know, didn't she? He would ask the hero how he found out her name in the first place. But as he considered it, the answer became increasingly obvious. He was the number one hero. He must have more powerful connections than he knew what to do with. Like Tsukachi, pull enough strings and All Might could probably tell Izuku what he had for breakfast. Or get his patient records. No, he wouldn't do that to you. That's just too cruel. You know he just wants to help you. But what if he thought he was helping? Midoriya? Izuku snapped out of the thoughts tumbling around his head, which were doing nothing to ease his growing headache. He refocused his attention back to All Might, who looked at him, eyebrows creased in worry. Izuku frowned. I really wish he'd stop looking so concerned all the time. Again, I am very sorry. I hope you can forgive me. Izuku shook his head back and forth for a moment, trying to clear it. His aching brain protested at the movement, causing him to wince in pain. He cursed his stupidity, before delicately unfurling the fists he didn't even know he had formed. It's fine, he said. I'm not angry. And it was true, he realized. He wasn't angry. He was scared. His teacher looked relieved. His concern hadn't evaporated completely, but he seemed content for now. I'm glad. He nodded, smiling thinly. Then, oh, and if you'd like to know, I didn't find anything incriminating about your doctor. She has almost exclusively positive references. Izuku gave him a look, and All Might at least had the decency to look ashamed. That being said, I definitely won't do something like this again. Well, not without asking, at least. Izuku tried to decide between glaring at the hero or laughing. He compromised with a deep, suffering sigh. Izuku! Midoriya Izuku ran up to her son and dragged him into a bone-crushing hug. The woman could be surprisingly strong when she wanted to, Izuku noted in pain. Big fat tears soaked his shoulder as the woman cried into it. My poor heart can't take it, she wailed, bringing him impossibly closer. Really strong, ouch. When the policeman called and told me it was about you, I thought for sure it was going to stop. I'm so glad you're fine. Her worried sobs was enough to break down the walls around Izuku's heart that he had so carefully crafted the last few resets, at least temporarily. He circled his arms around her cautiously, returning her hug and ignoring the way his ribs creaked in protest. He didn't have the heart to tell her to ease up, not when she held on to him like she would lose him forever once she let go. Eventually, after her shaking and sobs had calmed somewhat, she began to relax and Izuku's torso cried in sweet relief. She retrieved her head from his shoulder to stare up at him, emerald green still shining with unshed tears and red around the edges. Don't ever worry me like that again, she hiccuped, lips trembling. If something were to happen to you, if you. She cut herself off with a sob, pushing her face back into his shirt and tugging at the fabric desperately. I don't know what I would do without you, Ship, Izuku whispered, bringing a scarred hand up to card through her dark green locks. Don't worry about that. You won't ever have to worry about me leaving you. He blinked to clear up his blurred vision and was surprised at the salty beads that rolled down his cheeks. He wiped them off lazily. Come to think of it, I haven't been crying as much as I used to. How can I not? Inko shook her head, sniffling loudly. I will always worry about you. That's what it means to be a parent. She tilted her head to look at him. But, her voice shook, but her expression slowly bloomed into a tentative smile. The corners of her mouth wobbled with strain, but it was warm, and it was genuine. Izuku felt his heart clench, but for once it wasn't in pain. I heard what you did. You were really cool, Izuku, he crumbled. His mother's embrace was so warm, so strong, safe. He could allow himself to break just this once because he knew that as soon as his cries had ended, as soon as his tears dried, she would be there. She would put the pieces back together, and Izuku could be strong again. For a moment, he allowed himself weakness. For a moment, he didn't want to care. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination.